So don't stand in front of the camera. What do you think?
I don't know. I think we can work it on the
Hey, Priya, can you support us?
I know, it's so hard. What do you think?
Rebecca, you've never felt
I'm so glad you I was like, wait, who's the woman? So you heard she's like really less painful. I love how this ended. Thank you.
So, Wilson, you're gonna be on.
I'll follow it.
Oh, yeah.
I know,
There's a lot of that's where I go. We could cook for time. Yeah, that is my thing.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like we.
Oh, yeah, come on. Yes.
Found your water bottle? Good,
Yeah.
good, good.
Oh, the crust.
At least
So like,
So the first semester. Video, radio.
So love it.
Do you want water?
then after that, we hand it over to you.
Grow a lot of information at you.
People, please eat pastries. We don't like having so many excess pastries here because it makes all of us eat sugar all day. So please do a service to the community by eating pastries.
Wayne, can you put this on the?
Just start presentation.
See everybody.
Hi, Roger.
Hi, Roger.
No one likes sitting in the front row.
All alone, that's me. Okay, everyone, it is noon, so let's get started. Thank you, first of all, for being here today. And wanted to thank our organizers and activists from DXC who are joining via the live stream. So welcome to our community space. Hopefully we can have you here in person soon. But I will be introducing this the presentation for today, and then just to note, if anyone who's joining from online has any questions, comments, Wilson is going to be on chat, so he will take your questions and any comments that you have that we will later bring up during the discussion segment of this presentation. All right, so without further ado, let's get started. So welcome to today's event, which is Turn the Tables and the Liberation Pledge. All of us have been on the other side of the table where we have seen our friends, our family members eating bodies of animals. And we've all had this moral dilemma where we ask ourselves, what do we do? And what do I say if I say anything? And how do I deal with this? And the question is always like, how to influence others. And most importantly, we have this moral dilemma in regards to the animal who's being eaten, and like how horrible it is that we have to watch their bodies being brutalized. So today we want to introduce a new idea, a new concept, and a new action which has the potential to change the way in which we view animals that are on our table and animals at large in society, how people view animals. So welcome to this presentation, and thank you for joining us as we introduce the Liberation Pledge. So what is the Liberation Pledge? The pledge has three aspects, and I'll just read them. The first is that starting with this holiday season, to publicly refuse to eat animals this holiday season and beyond. And then the second is to publicly refuse to sit where animals' bodies are being eaten. And then the third is to encourage other people, especially activists, to take this pledge, to empower ourselves and support each other in doing this. So today we'll be talking about the history, the science, about why we thought this was a good idea and what is behind the pledge. And then also we wanted the feedback of our community here and also our community joining us internationally about what are your thoughts? What are some ways in which we can improve this, and how to really how can we make this as successful as possible? And so we will have a really good portion of this meeting which will be dedicated to question, answers, discussion, feedback, and so yeah, let me start by giving it to Chris. So Chris will take it from here.
Okay, I'm going to use my notes. So at least for about 2 years now, I personally have made a commitment to not celebrate or enjoy myself around violence or symbols of violence. And so I look at, I've taken literally our slogan, it's not food, it's violence. So this is violence, and I'm not going to have a good time around violence. Essentially, this has meant that if I go into a restaurant that serves animals' bodies, or even a vegetarian restaurant, I treat it like a grocery store, a place to do an errand, maybe a place I will protest later, but it's a place of violence, not a place to have a good time. I'll talk more about this later, but the short end is that this has helped me to take a stronger stance for the animals in a variety of ways, and helped me to have a greater impact on other activists, people in my family, including my grandmother hosting a vegan Christmas last year, and more importantly, my parents and my nieces coming to protests. And my dad getting super enthusiastic, to the point where I have to restrain him sometimes. So this has had a huge impact on my personal network. So, and I would like, to go to the next slide. All right, so, sorry, this is a graphic image of foot binding, what the deformation of a foot. So this is a historical example, and this is really where we got the idea for this pledge. There was a historical campaign against foot binding in China, and it struggled for 1,000 years. There's this foot binding, and they did education, lobbying, and countless other methods, and nothing had any traction. Nothing like really put a dent in this horrible disfigurement, which no one really as far as I can tell, no one really was like, yeah, this is great. You know, they just did it because it was the tradition. But in 1890, campaigners found the magic bullet for this situation. They created a public pledge where families could group together and promise two things. Never bind their daughter's feet. So publicly they would say this. And then publicly they would say, we refuse to allow our sons to marry women with bound feet. So they weren't just saying we're not going to do it, but we're also not going to encourage other people to do it by not letting our sons marry. These pledges, while initially very difficult, they grew like wildfire. And after nothing really working for 1,000 years, in one generation, completely ended the practice of foot binding. And we can do the same for animals by refusing to participate in violent practices, but also refusing to accept violence as like a normal thing that's okay in our community. And I'm going to ask Wayne to talk about some social science reasons.
So I'm Wayne, and many of you know that I have social networks and social science background as a researcher at a few universities. And I'm interestingly going to talk a little bit about smoking. So does anyone know what percentage of the population currently smokes? I actually don't remember myself anymore, but it's roughly 1 in 4. I think it might have gone down or up a little bit. And I might actually be not entirely accurate, but it's roughly 1 in 4. Does anyone know what percentage of people smoked, like 50 years ago? It was well over half the population. Like a huge number of people smoked. And the anti-smoking campaigns have been surprisingly difficult. I mean, partly because it's addictive, but partly because once a behavior becomes normative, it's very hard to pull it out, to pull out its roots out, because its roots are so deep. And so for the past 40 years, especially after research started coming out in the 60s and the 50s showing that smoking actually was deadly. In fact, it's one of the most deadly behaviors to ourselves that anyone can engage in. There's all this research showing the detrimental effects of smoking, but all of our efforts to end smoking really kind of didn't work very well. We tried just spreading information about the health consequences of smoking, and that put in a little bit of a dent in. We tried massive advertising campaigns, both funded by public and funded by various nonprofit agencies. Taxation, then increase the cost. Even putting horrible imagery of disease lungs. There's interventions in Canada and some places in the United States and Europe where you literally have an image of like a diseased black lung on every smoking package. But most of these things at most affect smoking rates by like 1% or 2%, and they haven't had a huge impact. But there's one intervention that Harvard sociologist and medical school professor, and actually he's at Yale now, sorry, just moved from Harvard to Yale, found and published in the New England Journal of Medicine that revolutionized not just the anti-smoking literature, but sociology, economics, and political science more generally, and has influenced now a decade of research into social influence and social persuasion. And this intervention has led to declines in smoking by as many as 67% of people who have been exposed to it. And does anyone have any guess as to what this intervention might be? If you know me, it has to do with public demonstrations, but if you know me, you're probably going to guess something about social networks, and you'd be right. The intervention is just influenced by your immediate peers. Because it turns out human beings are heavily influenced by our immediate peers. When we're in Rome, we do as the Romans do, and what our friends do, what our spouses do, what our coworkers do. We look at the behavior that's being modeled for us, and we emulate it. And this is usually a fairly useful way to operate. Like if you see everyone walking to the left, it's probably a good idea to go along, because historically, if you walk to the right, maybe you walk off a cliff. You go to the area that's very dangerous. You go to the area that doesn't have any food. So going along with other people is a very useful thing. But it's not useful when everyone's going in a direction that's bad for themselves or for someone else. And that's basically the way we all see animal rights, right? That the entire society is moving in the wrong direction. And so we're facing this uphill obstacle of peer influence. So there's a general phenomenon that extends far beyond the smoking literature to everything from obesity to happiness to violence. Violence tends to spread in social networks like a virus almost, that shows that by far the most effective treatment for almost any social ill is changing someone's social network, the social environment. And when the social environment changes, no matter how firmly vested they were against the practice at issue, they will change too. And one of the great examples of this is there's a senator in Ohio recently, a Republican senator. I forget his name. Does anyone remember the senator in Ohio who came out in favor of gay marriage recently? Who for decades was very fiercely opposed to gay marriage. All it took was his son coming out and saying, I'm gay and I support gay marriage, and suddenly it changed. And so that was like a powerful example of this. So the obvious question for us is, well, how do these pure effects operate? Because it could be that all you have to do is change someone, but obviously that seems to not be working in animal rights, right? Because we have vegans everywhere, and why aren't they creating these huge cascades of change just by virtue of being vegan? And the reason I think that hasn't happened is because what Chrisakis and others have found is it's not just the behavior itself that changes people, it's the behavior plus the creation of a social norm. And so these pure effects seem to operate most powerfully when my behavior isn't just seen as my behavior, but it's seen as something that's becoming normative in the entire community. And you've probably seen this on a very trivial level, even just growing up in high school, like when bell bottoms get in fashion, like suddenly everyone feels social pressure. It's like, but it can't be that someone just wears the bell bottoms. It has to be someone wears the bell bottoms and someone else wears the bell bottoms, and then suddenly everyone thinks you're supposed to wear bell bottoms. And suddenly you can have an entire school, maybe literally 2 months ago, who all thought bell bottoms were ridiculous and ugly, suddenly deciding, no, they're the coolest thing in town. Everyone's got to wear them, and feeling bad if they don't. And so the key insight here is that it's not enough for the behavior to change and for an individual to change. It has to extend to some sort of social norm. It has to be the case that not only do I change my behavior, but I start believing that it's normative, that not only I should do it, but everyone else should do this too, because it's the right thing to do. And this is what social scientists call institutions. Institutions at a very basic level are shared understandings about appropriate behavior in the world. And we have legal institutions, which are written in stone sometimes, that indicate here's the things you do and here's the things that you don't do. And the powerful thing about institutions is once an institution is in place and everyone understands it's in place, it actually doesn't matter what I personally think. So there are a lot of people who probably don't have a problem with murder individually in this country, but it's written and encoded in law. They know that everyone around them opposes murder, and they know if they try and murder someone, there are going to be some serious consequences. So it actually doesn't matter what I personally decide about murder. I'm probably going to be stopped from murdering people just by virtue of the social network and the social environment that I'm in. So the key insight here, again, is the first thing is change happens through peer influence, and the second is the peer influence that matters most is social norms, the creation of these norms. And it turns out one of the most powerful norms that has animated human behavior since our beginnings as a species are moral norms, moral and ethical norms. Because as Robert Wright wrote, human beings are the moral animals. We believe fiercely in the idea that some behaviors are not just wrong and not just inappropriate, but wrong and inappropriate in a way that justifies some sort of collective intervention, right? So the difference between a fashion norm like bell bottoms and murder is that in the latter case, not only is it wrong, but it's wrong in a way that justifies me stopping you from doing what you're doing, right? And how do we create these powerful norms? Well, this is the million-dollar question, and there are a lot of interesting experiments that have been formed, and a psychologist and anthropologist at Caltech who's done some really groundbreaking work in this area, named Gene Pensminger, let me just let someone else do it, has written that the basic mechanism through which moral norms, and moral norms especially, are formed is through some sort of consistent reinforcement. It's just like when you've ever tried to teach a kid or a dog, you realize that positive reinforcement and denial positive reinforcement is really important. It has to be consistent. And so what we're trying to do with the Liberation Pledge is create this consistent reinforcement of the notion that animals are not things, they're persons, and those persons deserve the same moral dignity that we give to a human being who's in a similar situation. And what we connote when we say, like, hey, this isn't about you or me, it's not about my love for you, because in fact I do have a great relationship with you, I do believe you're a great person. What I don't like is what this industry is doing to the animals. And I don't like the fact that this is a product of that violence. And so what I'd like to do is collectively, let's work together to try and create a new norm where industries like this and practices like this are not acceptable. And will you join me in this effort? And that's the key part of the pledge. It's not just that it's my belief. It's not just that it's my belief that I'm going to try and kind of persuade you to join in, but it's that we collectively are going to go and try and persuade the world. And that I think all those elements are very important. And that consistency of reinforcement is very important to creating a norm that hopefully will eventually change the world. So in a nutshell, I think what we're trying to do is turn the tables and conventional views on animals and eating animals and go on offense. Because I think for 40 years since this movement was started, we've always been playing defense. We feel like we have to be ashamed of ourselves, we're embarrassed that we're vegan, people make fun of us. And what we're trying to do is empower everyone and encourage them to empower others to join a movement and join a mentality that frankly resonates very well with the intuitions of people across the world. When 79% of the people in this country and around the world believe that animals should be protected from quote, all suffering and harm, when 1/3 of people already believe that animals deserve the same rights as human beings, the kindling is out there. It's ready for us to energize and ignite into a movement. And it might take 10 years, it might take 40 years, it might take 100, but we need to start playing offense and not just sitting back on our heels. And that's what we're trying to do at the Plush.
So I first want to point out that Wayne is one of the strongest believers of nonviolence, and I'm certain he never wants to murder anyone, regardless of whatever social norms are of the community he's in. So I just want to.
Except plants.
Plants.
I'm a plant
Yeah,
guy.
he will kill plants. So I want to talk about a few different things now. So sorry, I'm going to yap for a while. The effect on us as activists. So, like Wayne was talking about, the social science of like the effect on communities, on other people. But I think the most important thing that has happened to me is the effect it had on me myself. This has forced me to evaluate my own speciesism as I try to act as I would if there were a human child on the table being cut up and served for food. And I know that I'm falling short. I am not acting as if they were a human. But I see this as a step to reduce my own speciesism. So speciesism is, an entrenched system of violence and discrimination, and this is, to me, a small step at working against that. This has helped me to consider the animals' lives as their own in a more powerful way, to look at a body in the refrigerator or on a table and be angry or sad about it, and to express those emotions in a more authentic way. And so that's one thing. Another thing is an effect on fellow activists. And so this is, if I see this as sort of like a challenge, is one way to look at it. And it's interesting that the people who've been most bothered by my taking this stance have not really necessarily been my family or even other friends, but from my perspective at least, have been other animal rights activists and other vegans who have been perhaps upset that there's this place that's got great vegan options, why won't they go there? And I'm just because it's a place of violence, it's I can go there. I can walk in there, but I'm not going to enjoy myself. I'd rather protest than sit and have a meal there. So that's one thing that I thought was interesting. But another thing is empowerment. And other activists have told me that by my doing this, and Wayne also doing this, although what we do is a little different, has led them to do it, or something very similar. And although any life change that we do is very difficult, each person that I know to have done this has been proud and felt empowered by it. And so yeah, they've really been glad that they were able to do this, and they felt and I think they were taking a stronger stance for animals. And the third thing is that I think this has strengthened community norms against violence towards animals. So when you see it's oh yeah, this is a place of violence. Look at every place that sells dead bodies as a place of violence. That's I don't know why that's not a norm in our community, but it's not. And so and I understand very much I used to have fun going grocery shopping with a friend or whatever, and I never have fun going grocery shopping anymore. And I understand that's a drain, psychologically or whatever, but for me, these are all places of violence, and I get so upset. So I mostly I just buy fruit down the street, not because I love fruit, but because I can buy 40 pounds of fruit and they don't have any dead animals there, and I don't have to go to the grocery store. So maybe I just take advantage of living with other humans who go to the grocery store, and I don't have to do anything.
This is true.
But I think that other people have started to take this more as a norm as a result. And as I spoke about earlier, like this is my mom and one of my nieces at the DXC forum, and this is another niece, and this is my dad. And so like, you know, they have all like said that they agree to animal rights now, and they're not yet vegetarian. They're moving in that direction. My dad said he's moving towards being a vegan, and like he said he can't go to small protests because he's worried he's going to get like in a fight with someone. So he needs to be in the middle. He needs to be in the middle of a lot of other activists to help him with his nonviolence. So because he believes in it. But anyways, I just wanted to showcase like the power that this has had, like this has helped me to have over with my family. An effect on broader culture. Like, I mean, in last year, my grandma hosted a vegan Christmas. When I had dinner with my aunt and uncle, like my uncle told me, he's like, I did not wear a leather jacket because I knew that like that would be upsetting to you. It's like, yeah, violence is upsetting to me. And it's like, but then he was wearing like I don't know, it was like wool or something. But he didn't think that because he thought, well, this is not killing the animal. So he's like, but I think just that I have this stance, like they know that they have to think about like, does this thing hurt an animal? Like, and if it does, Chris is not going to be happy with that. So I'd rather them just be not happy with hurting animals, but I think this has been like positive steps, even with people that I don't have very regular contact with. And so, yeah, and I think that for friends, family, and other associates with work and other types of activism, I don't think anything has made my stance against violence more clear than doing this. It's like I had been a vegetarian for a while, then a vegan for a while, going to protests for a while, but when I said like, no, like I can't be around this violence and smile, like that has made it very clear to everyone that, okay, this is violence. And so it's just made it, I don't know, I've already said that, but I'll say it again. Like, this has made it clear that I oppose violence more so than anything else that I've ever done. So, and me mostly yapping is over. So we're gonna have a discussion. Some questions I think should be answered by Wayne, some by myself, some by other people who are here. And this is also going to be open to questions from the international community that Wilson will tell us. Should we have general feedback first, or should we ask about specifics like symbols and webpage and such?
Yeah, I think we should definitely put out things so that people can get, have an idea of what some components are.
Yeah, Wilson, do you want to take out the bracelet?
Is it in the middle?
Wait, what the hell, kitty?
What? What? Okay. So symbols are very important for a lot of things that I don't necessarily understand. But I think all of you understand that symbols are as important as much as I do. So Wayne can describe better. So there's a number of like movements where people have like bracelets. They wear a bracelet to indicate that they support this or that or the other. And they have those like cheap little rubber ones that, and so that's a possibility. This is another possibility. So I'll hold this up. Like Wilson made this in a few minutes.
Wayne and I did.
Wayne and I.
It's for Priya's wrist. You're not going to go clear on.
Yeah,
Put
Wayne
it
did.
Priya Shimala. Because it's
Okay.
for Priya's wrist.
Okay.
Your hands are too big.
Can I?
I have tiny hands.
Not the same.
Not a small screen.
Right.
you want to model it for the TV?
Okay.
It's like QDC now. TXC. So yeah, okay. So this is one of the symbols we're considering. It's like a fork, and maybe we do the tips. Maybe we do the. Can you help me out? Maybe doing the tips in like red nail polish or red paint or something. So is this? So one of the feedback questions we have is like, do you think this is a powerful symbol? Like this is sort of like.
Can I give a little bit more
Yeah, please
rationale
do.
on why we? So I was at the gym and I was listening to podcasts, and I was listening to a particular podcast on the in the 70s, the AIDS awareness movement. So back in the 70s, AIDS was really a huge crisis. But even though it was killing hundreds of people, well, loads of people everywhere, it was a silent crisis because there was such a big taboo about talking about it in public. So a bunch of activists got together and they said, how are we going to get the public talking about this? This is a very important issue. And so what they did was they created the very first ribbon. Have you ever seen those ribbons for like breast cancer? This is a looper ribbon and you pin it onto your clothing. They were the ones who started that. And the way they launched this and made it a huge success was the months before, I think the Academy Awards at that time, they sent letters to the celebrities at that time. I don't know any celebrities from that time.
It was the Tony Awards.
Tony Awards, thank you. Yeah, it was one of the awards. Thank you. And then they asked them, so, could you please support our cause? And they, back in the day, it was all snail mail. They had no idea whether or not this was going to launch. So on the day off, they watched this on television, and they were hoping this was going to work. And one by one, the people, like the celebrities, stepped out from their limousines, and they all had pins. And like the strangest thing was the media at the time, because there was such a big taboo about talking about it. The media didn't completely ignored it, but this just fanned the fires even more because people were dying to know what this was about. And the very next day, the person who started this entire campaign, he was walking the street with a ribbon on his leg, and someone people were literally stopping him and saying, tell us what this is about. I saw this on TV. I think none of the newspapers are talking about it. What is this about? And he told him, and it's yeah, okay, that's great. That's and one of the guys actually offered him $100 for that small ribbon at that time. Anyways, that's besides the point. So the point of the story is that one, it's really important to have a symbol that is really salient. So by wearing something like this that is both original and interesting, it prompts people to invites people to ask questions about what it's about and why you're wearing it. So it's a good outreach method. And two, it's interesting enough. I wasn't a fan of the ribbon or the bracelets because they've been over 200 campaigns have used the ribbon. And also the idea is that hopefully we can host a community events where we all make these together. Hopefully a little bit better than this. It's a bit dangerous actually. And it will be a nice reminder that once we go into the holidays, this is something that we built together as a community and reminds us of the pledge that we took personally and we took collectively as well. And in case you didn't pick, well, there are several references with choosing a bent fork. One, for me, when I first thought of it, it was sort of reclaiming the power of mealtimes. Because a lot of writers have talked about how the humble fork is the biggest weapons against animals. And so by bending it and reclaiming it, we've taken that power back. Apparently it's a biblical reference too. I didn't know about this until Zach, you're watching. He told us about this. Apparently it's a famous line in the Bible called to bend your swords into plowshares. Same kind of idea to reclaim weapons and use them into something productive and something peaceful. The last reference is if you've ever watched Forks Over Knives. It's not as cool, but it's cool. Sorry, I love that film. That's all I have to say.
Wait, can you show the bracelet one more time up close to the camera?
Yeah, sure. So I would put it on, but I don't fit in that. But it goes around there. Yeah, there you go.
It's a little bit.
Can I comment on just two aspects of it? One is, I mean, there's a lot of wonderful research, most of it done by a very famous University of Pennsylvania professor, showing that for things to become contagious socially, having some sort of public and visual demonstration is very important. So like, if we're all quiet, silent vegans and no one knows that we're vegan, it's not nearly as powerful as having some sort of, as Wilson said, salient public display. And the more public it is, the more powerful it is. But the second thing I wanted to emphasize is, while I know the celebrities were important to the AIDS campaign, all the research that I've read for the past 15 years suggests that the power of social movements is the power of ordinary people. It wasn't the celebrities who made this campaign powerful. It was the fact that ordinary people jumped into it. And it wasn't until ordinary people jumped into it and you saw these AIDS ribbons on people on the street everywhere that suddenly people started thinking. And it didn't take that many. I mean, this is far less than 1% of the total population actually wearing ribbons. It's probably like maybe 1 in 10,000 or 1 in 1,000 people. But if you're living in a city like San Francisco or New York and 1 in 1,000 people is wearing a ribbon, that means you're probably going to see a ribbon pretty often, right? And you're going to wonder, why are all these people wearing these ribbons? And so, but it was really the fact that ordinary people felt empowered to take some sort of action and make a public statement about a system they did not like that really created the campaign. And I think the same will be true of this campaign.
Does anyone have any comments either through Wilson on the chat or in person about the fork idea?
No questions on here, just comments.
Any comments you think that we should share?
People like it. I'm biased, but yeah, you can read it yourself. Well, Mike from Connecticut says he will totally host this at the school. So several representatives from our student network has said, they want to host this at their school, like a fork making party, bracelet making party. Yeah, I'll let you know if you have questions.
Well, yeah.
It's brilliant to have a symbol, but I also think about having a symbol that attracts the masses, that they want to wear, that it's cool, that it's hip, right? Like, so what are social symbols that spread, like friendship bracelets or other things when I was young, where it was like, I want one of those. Where'd you get that? That's really neat. So, I'm not, for me personally, I'm like, I'm not sure I'd wear it for. But I would absolutely 100% wear something where I was like, damn, I am effing proud to be vegan. And like, how can you proud? And I want to advertise that I am.
Do you have any suggestions for things that would be more awesome?
I don't, but I can think about it. I'm not a very creative person.
Michael?
Well, I would love it if someone could speak to the issue of what do you do if, like in my case, my father-in-law and his wife, not only do they eat meat, he's 87, okay? He's not going to be around for very many more years. And not only do they eat meat, but they believe that for their health, they have to. Like, they both have, or his wife has type 2 diabetes, and she has this cockamamie idea that she needs to just eat protein and meat to be able to keep her diabetes in control. And so if we are going to share a meal with them when we visit down to LA and we stay in their house, we have to deal with them, eating meat. And so basically it's sort of a choice of not staying at their house, right? Which would certainly offend them, but it wouldn't be like they would go, oh yeah, we can just stop eating meat because they think they have to eat it. And so that would be one, and then the other would be, if we're going to share a meal with them, they're doing that. And so how do you, I'm sure a lot of people have these kinds of situations, and so how, it seems like horrible to like what if he dies, in 2 years, and then we haven't had any meals, shared any meals, or visited them, stayed with them because of our commitment to the pledge. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely want to really encourage everyone to maintain their relationships, like with your family and your friends, and in business or whatever. These relationships are important for a variety of reasons, including that these are people that we can have an effect on. Like I think everyone has their own specific place. For me, like I often stay at people's houses who eat animals, and like I said, like if I open a fridge door, this is like a real thing. This happens. I open a refrigerator door and there's a dead body in there, and it's incredibly upsetting. I can express myself, or sometimes I can leave, and so like, but I don't know. It's a difficult situation. Does anyone else? I think we can also talk more about. I think we are going to talk a lot about community support and different things like that later. I want to keep it on this bracelet for a little bit longer. One thought that immediate reaction I had to your thinking of wanting the symbol to be cool, I actually like. Well, one, I'm not looked at as. I don't think I've ever consider myself to be cool. Certainly not with the things that I wear. But but I dressed up today. My clothes don't have any holes. Like, but because I wouldn't want it to be like a symbol. It's like that people are wearing it and they're like, oh, it doesn't mean anything. Like people are like, oh, I think that's cool. I'll wear one, and they don't know why. They don't know how it came about. You have a thought on that? Were you raising your hand?
No, I was just doing that.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Things become cool.
Yeah.
It's not just that something is instantly cool.
Sure.
It becomes cool. If like, a really, considered hip, artist is wearing, a plaid shirt,
Yeah.
then people start wearing, like Neil Young wore plaid shirts. And a lot of guys started wearing plaid shirts when Neil Young was on the radio and popular at that time. And so that bracelet could become very cool because of what it means, because of the symbolism.
Yeah. I would just really like it to mean something first, and then if it becomes cool later, that's cool. Honestly.
I really love that idea, and I like the fact that before I've seen people selling forks as bracelets and stuff before. But but they usually take an antique silver, whatever, and do a number on it. And I love the fact that that's like a cheap fork, and that it's something that we could make, and it's not in any way exclusive in terms of economics. And I really love the humility of it, and because it's like, if I wore like one of those silver things or whatever, they sell them in parts of the South, and no one would notice it, right? Oh, maybe they would say, oh, that's a cheap bracelet or something. But if you had like a funky looking fork wrapped around your wrist,
You look terrible.
Yeah.
So it doesn't look like jewelry.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I like the idea. I think it's terrific.
So
Can I make a suggestion?
sure.
Just real fast. We want everyone to have a chance to contribute, and if everyone's okay with it, we have this little baton. So maybe we can all go around the room, and of course, you don't have to speak if you don't want to, but we also want to open up the room so that everyone can.
Yeah. We do that later.
For general discussion.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
don't know.
Around a lot. So the way I have it is we're going to do Suchi, Chris, and Sammer. So Suchi.
So just one suggestion, like you were talking about painting the tips of the fork with red, symbolizing the blood. So this might be a little expensive, but I think effective if we have something engraved, like against animal killing, or all animals are, or all living beings are equal. And that too in red, so that it's fashionable, like matching and the style. and at the same time, it's giving the message.
That's definitely a possibility I would consider. We have Chris, Sammer, and then the internet.
At first, I was kind of weirded out by the idea. You know, they just walked up like before, shove it on your wrist. But
Hello.
the more I think of it, the more I think that's why it's gonna be so useful, because it is so strange if you're walking around with a dinner fork on your wrist. So it kind of forces people to ask you, why are you wearing that? And you know, with vegans, they're always like, shut up. Shut your mouth, I enjoy my steak. But then if they ask it, they can't get away. They have invited you to explain. They have, you know, initiated it. So they socially cannot be like, no. So they have to hear the reasoning behind it. So you actually get a chance to, you know, talk about animal rights. Because if I see someone walk around with some yard sale fork on their wrist, I'm gonna ask, like, what are you doing for your life? Point in your life, you know. And I think that's the point, that it's so outlandish that we have to spread the information, and other people will want to know why. So they're gonna like come to us and ask us why we're wearing this.
So you have Sammer and then the internet.
Yeah. I just want to talk about your point about it like not looking good, because that's what I thought at first. I was like, no one would ever, like, I'm never. And then as the people started talking about it, like I heard about the symbolism. Now I like really.
Me too.
Yeah.
I will wear it.
Wow, so I didn't do a good enough job of modeling.
So can we actually write that down? Because I think the explanation most engaged with symbolism it might be important. And that's not currently on the website.
Yes.
I don't think it looks that bad.
Me neither. Can I add my comments here?
Yes,
So like,
please.
I actually got the idea from Joanne MacArthur. So Joanne MacArthur is probably the most famous photographer in animal rights. Most of our posters you see photos taken by her.
Yeah.
And she wears a fork bracelet, so she's already on our side.
Oh.
And the reason why I thought of this idea is because everyone asks her about that fork bracelet. They're like, "Oh, that's cool. Where'd you get that from? Is there where how did you come up with that?" And like so many people were prompted to ask questions about that fork bracelet. So that's where I got the idea from. Now I'm gonna try and summarize what everyone said on the internet. A lot of positive feedback. Yeah, a lot actually. Some people have said maybe the fork might be too focused on the diet. So some people suggested, well, maybe we had like animal liberation, like sort of like engraved onto it or like painted onto it, or but then other people said they don't want it to be customized too much because for it to be recognizable, it has to have some degree of uniformity in it. Aside from France, that he thinks that a simple fork is enough, so that way it's like accessible and everyone can make it, can easily make it, and it's also very recognizable. And I think that's it. And they think it's a good conversation starter. Yeah, that's all I have to say.
Quick point of clarification, is would the fork symbolize that you had embraced all three components of this particular pledge, or just in general we're supporting animal liberation?
I think we're thinking of it as a symbol for the pledge. We would like the pledge to have a symbol.
But that's also something that's subject to discussion. We haven't, part of the reason we have this community event is we weren't sure. I mean, maybe what should symbolize just support for the general idea of the pledge, that we need to create norms of influence that spread around the idea that animals are persons and not just things. Sorry.
So my initial reaction to seeing the fork was that that's badass, it's punk as fuck. And hearing say like I wouldn't wear that, I was like, oh yeah, there's gonna be people that aren't gonna think that that's awesome. That wouldn't work for it, and I'm sure that's still the case probably.
Yeah.
Okay, so my idea was, and I love the fork because, like, just kind of piggybacking on the fork with nothing else, it can be universal and
do it yourself, like people can do it anywhere. It's not like it has to like be manufactured at the DXC headquarters in France, you know. So and I think it would be helpful, Wilson, to name. Did you do it with a hammer? Like just how many tools did you need? Did you use that before? Pliers. Okay. So anyone out there listening, all you need is pliers and a fork. But the other thought was for people who that fat punk as fuck wouldn't be exciting, like to get the Lance Armstrong Ben bracelets and get a picture of a fork on, like, get a handful of those made for like, and so it's like similar shared symbolism. But,
Does anyone know the Lance Armstrong reference? Do you want to
the
explain that to people?
plastic bracelets.
Like the
that
Livestrong
was it
thing.
testicular cancer?
Yep.
That
Livestrong.
Livestrong, yeah.
And they
And
grew up.
then they've gone, yeah.
Millions and millions of people bought them.
I just wanted to kind of add on to the same point. I think that, I mean, symbols can be associated with just about everything. I mean, think about, you know, a wedding ring. We mostly just associate the location on your body, like that it's on a particular finger, rather than like if it's gold or if it's silver or if it's this, right. So like every symbol kind of has something that makes it particularly recognizable and carries some particular meaning for whoever uses it. And I think especially if it's something like you could do like the red tip with nail polish or something else, it's just as, you know, accessible. But like the red tip, it's very easy to have it also be like a pair of earrings if somebody wanted that, or like the tip of a fork on like a pendant that somebody can keep a little closer, you know, to hear if they don't want it on their arm, or like you said, like the Livestrong thing with like a bracelet, you know, some kind of more standard bracelet with a fork on it. Like I think that it would be really cool if the majority of people have the same thing, but if somebody does something that is still in light of it and that's what they want to do, I personally don't think that would take away from it. Maybe other folks disagree. I don't know.
Cool. So I think, and this is something we can definitely take more suggestions on in the future and more input on. Do you have anything else?
So another suggestion from the side in France is that once this launches, it's not just, we're not just public by wearing it in public, but also if everyone like took a picture of, actually Mike took a picture, we should have put it in a slideshow of like him holding it, his like his fists, like sort of like classic activism fists, and with the fork around, and then if we like, you know, spread this through social media with a common hashtag, it could be really powerful.
Yeah, I really like that.
Do you want to talk about the hashtags that we're thinking of?
Oh, yeah, so I was going to shift away from the bracelet discussion because we have other things to talk about. Do you want to talk about the hashtags? Maybe better.
Yeah, so we're launching the Liberation Pledge to accompany this big announcement that's going to happen in the middle of November. And I think it's going to be exposed in November. Hopefully will motivate people to take this sort of pledge when we start seeing even so-called humane agriculture for the violence and brutality and just desolation that it actually is. And so there are a number of hashtags I've considered using. One is obviously just hashtag Liberation Pledge. But the other is, we named the event this, Turn the Tables. Because the idea is, you know, for really thousands and maybe tens or hundreds of thousands of years, human beings who've had compassion for animals and seen all the other life on this planet as equal to us have really been kind of on our heels. We've been always on the defense. And you know, we want to sort of turn the tables and say, like, no, I mean, we're proud of who we are. We're proud of what we believe. And we want to try and encourage and empower you to join us because we believe in your heart of hearts, you believe the same things we do. And it's just a matter of a culture, a system, a society teaching us all these things that, and indoctrinating us to believe these things that we don't actually believe, you know, when we actually reflect on them. And we see this in the polling data. We see this in all the hypocrisies that are illuminated when you actually discuss animals with people. Like when you ask them what's the difference between a dog and a pig, they don't have any answers. And I've been doing this for 15 years, and I still haven't heard a good answer. So, you know, Turn the Tables is a hashtag that, you know, we want to be provocative and powerful and strong, but not necessarily adversarial, and certainly not adversarial in like an individual way. It's more about empowerment. It's about like, I'm empowered, join me in this. But there are other hashtags we've considered too. In the Thanksgiving season, something like Pardon All Animals, right? Because we know they're going to be turkey pardons, and like, you know, so I don't know. I mean, usually, especially in the modern world, anytime there's some sort of viral social media or social influence campaign, there's a hashtag associated with it. Black Lives Matter being an obvious example. So Turn the Tables is one thing we were thinking of. But we wanted to get feedback on that to see if people think that's too aggressive, not aggressive enough. Should it kick the table over? Should it be like serve vegan food on the table? Or I mean, you know, what do you think?
And this is again a thing that like, you know, we can get like future correspondence about,
or
like
email,
and we did all our ideas for this, right? And so our international organizers, I think, picked this one, and out of a variety of ones. So, yeah.
I was just gonna give feedback. I like Tuna Tables the best because when I saw the Facebook event, it was really intriguing. I wasn't sure what it was about, and I think it's more exciting than maybe Liberation Pledge, and I like it better than Harden All Animals because it doesn't have the word animal in it. And what I really like about Direct Action Everywhere is that it doesn't have the word animal in the name because most animal organizations do have it, and it just makes people question it, and I think it's more unique. So, Tuna Tables is my favorite.
I'll point out something that I did not know, which was that like with hashtags, it's often useful to have it be a little vague, because then people really need to click it. Like have it be interesting and yet vague. And again, like I'm the least expert person on these things, but like I'm learning about them. So that's another thing we're definitely open to future comments about. I'm gonna bring us to the web page. Or not. There we go.
So we're going to have to. And should we share with people online?
Listen, do you want to lead the web page talking about it?
The URL.
Oh, and online the web page is liberationpledge.com.
Can we just emphasize this is still a draft webpage, so we actually would not encourage people to share this, both for folks in the room and online. But this is a work in progress. We haven't decided exactly how it's going to operate. We haven't even decided the nature of the pledge or the hashtag. So like, don't share this yet. Wait for us to launch it because that's part of what we're doing today, getting feedback.
So yeah, like Wayne said, it's still a work in progress. So it's not fully pretty yet. So it's
Pretty good.
Yeah, doesn't it? Yeah.
So it's simple with the Swedish national colors, and the pledge is simple. You know, it's 3 points. So can everyone see? Is the text small? I'll zoom in. Okay. So the pledge is simple. 1, publicly refuse to eat animals this holiday season and beyond. 2, publicly refuse to sit where animals are being eaten and where their bodies lie. And 3, to really encourage other people who care about animals to take the pledge. And I'm not going to go through everything, but it just describes, you know, what the rationale behind it is. It talks a bit about what Chris talks about, the Chinese foot binding, and where we got the inspiration from that. And lastly, this is where it's still working on it, so it's not pretty. So it has a little like change.org style pledge form where you fill out, you hit your email address, you hit submit, and your name would show up in this list of people who've taken the pledge. Much like when you sign an online petition, which I'm sure most of you have. We're still working on the code to get that running. So
I like this part. Test. Hi, Mark.
So
I'm not going to be in the final.
if Mark is listening, Mark's been helping in this.
Oh yeah. That's a bunny. Yeah.
Oh, I was like, so that was Mark's work. A whole bunch of people. Shout out to the tech group who's been helping me a lot with all the programming and all the coding. And that's the end of the website. Did you want me to say something in particular? Laura asked about symbols and color. Symbols and color. Feedback. Did you want feedback for the website? Oh, yeah. People, any comments on the?
Looks great.
Cool. Rebecca?
So the 3-point part, where it says publicly refuse to say where animals are being eaten.
Yeah.
It seems like a vegetarian kind of thing. Like, are we gonna differ from like publicly refuse to eat where animals are eaten and their byproducts, or just animal bodies, the body of animals?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
So, like, so that is an excellent question. and I know there's been Facebook comments even before today about this, and that's something that's up for discussion and debate. So like, my personal feelings have been that like, I like framing it this way for a few reasons. One, like, we all have different standards. I mean, I don't know how many of us there are in this room. I'm guessing there's at a minimum 10 different standards for what vegan is. There might be a lot more. So like, I would not sit with probably like Priya sometimes with like what she would buy.
What?
But, like,
I'm vegan.
well, like I have like this
out
Priya. Well, like I have like a standard that like I think might like I even
Like
think might
refined
be-
sugar.
like I think might be ridiculous, right? And so like I certainly don't impose that standard on anyone else but myself. And so that's one reason. But the other reason I think is that there's a lot of like vegetarians out there who I think would do this, who really care a lot about animals, and having them be a part of this, I think is one, going to make them more likely to take more action for animals, and two, make them more likely to become vegan. That's my perspective, but I'm definitely open to other perspectives. And this is not my pledge. This is, and we also, this is not like the DXE pledge. This is the Liberation Pledge with its own website. We hope this is something that, I mean, we're obviously going to be the first supporters of, but there will be other animal rights groups. This is not like a DXE thing. This is an animal rights, animal liberation thing.
So, can I actually just add two quick things about the reason, because we did talk about this a little bit. The reason we initially framed it this way also is just for simplicity's sake. It just sounds more elegant and smoother, like saying animals and animal products. It's like we wanted to keep it super simple, just like social media friendly, so just for just rhetoric and optics reasons. But the other reason is like it's actually pretty hard to figure out if something's vegan, like just from sight. And we didn't necessarily think it was like wise for people to like interrogate everyone they're talking to as to, like whether every ingredient, like can I see the ingredient list in that cereal you're eating, you know, like figure out whether it has like, you know, mono and diglycerides that are non-vegan or non-vegan. Maybe we should do that, but the thinking was like it was strong enough and elegant enough and powerful enough just to say like the obvious things, we're not going to kind of countenance those things, but the less obvious things, like, you know, because then you get into a debate over like, oh, what are the ingredients in this and what are the ingredients in that? And I'm not saying that we shouldn't be thinking about those things and trying to boycott those industries as well, but just for like cognitive simplicity and ease, it was like easier to just say like, okay, these are the things that obviously I can see. This is bias.
Just the comments. If you're speaking off camera, both speak loudly, and it will also help you if you repeat.
I can repeat.
Yeah.
Should I repeat what Rebecca asked?
Sure.
Yeah, I'll repeat what Rebecca asked, which was that why just animals' bodies and why not including their secretions or other products from animal abuse and such. And so that was Rebecca's question. Sandler.
So I can just stand next to the microphone. I just want to second what Rebecca said, because the animal rights movement has a history of being too eager to like tell people about vegetarianism and like not emphasize veganism. And I remember one thing that struck me at the animal rights conference was one of like the keynote speakers talked only about like vegetarianism and like complete like emphasize like, oh, talk to me, I'm a vegetarian. And even though there are lots of like reasons that like seem sound and rational for like, well, it's like more inclusive, we just talk about like animals and like their bodies and like it would include vegetarians. I think it makes sense in this scenario to take a second look and see if like we can include like the fact that like, you know, none of us like want to eat around like animals like products either, because these are all the same category.
Yeah. And we definitely like the framing to be about animals and not about us. And so people can work on like smooth sounding ways to say animals and their byproducts. Because I just don't think that also, like Liam was saying, that doesn't sound like as cool, but I agree with the concept that you're saying. But I think that we have like maybe hundreds of people in this conversation, and so maybe someone can come up with like, we'll crowdsource like better names or better ways of phrasing that. Yeah. So, yeah.
Sort of similar, but someone, Avocado Hummus asks, why does the Liberation Pledge website avoid mentioning the word vegan? When do you want people to go vegan?
We absolutely want people to go vegan. I think a number of people have different perspectives on that word. I personally think it focuses too much on what I'm doing and not enough on the animals. I know in other parts of the world that is a powerful word for animal rights. In the Bay Area, it is sort of like a hipster like lifestyle thing, at least is my perspective. And it doesn't actually mean anything about animals in the Bay Area. Kings?
An idea I had, though I'm really open to how it sounds and what it focuses on, is for number 2, frame it as agree only to sit where no being has been harmed.
So Kang's suggestion is for number 2 instead to be agree to only sit where no being has been harmed.
One of the yes buts that's going on in my brain is I had coffee with some friends, and some of the people, even though they're not having the turkey sandwich, they're putting milk in their coffee. I don't know what kind of milk it is. It could be soy milk or whatever. But it would be really awkward, really, to say, what's that in your coffee? You know, I'm just trying to figure out how I would practically do it and maintain my friends. And it's like, it seems, because I'm spending a lot of time with DXC, my connections are getting a little bit wobbly, you know, with the outside world. And
And that's not necessarily a good thing. I don't think that's, no, but go ahead.
Yeah, I know, it's not that great. So, so anyway, that's where my brain is thinking, going, because I think, you know, okay, I'm not gonna sit here and, you know, while people consume flesh, it's the dairy, eggs are pretty easy, but the dairy is hard. So, it's just one of those things.
Eggs are easy until you introduce yourself to Morningstar. Like 1 out of 3 of the products is like, yes, but.
So I guess Leslie's concern was that you don't, if someone's pouring something, you know, whitish into their coffee, is that milk from an animal or milk from a plant? And so that's like a difficult thing to do. We have Priya and then Rebecca and then Dayton.
I'm gonna try to be loud so that they can hear me. Just on the last few questions, I just wanted to comment and, you know, kind of give an idea of why this framing. As Leslie, you said, like, this is something we should have all acknowledged. That this is something that is difficult. I mean, especially when there's already this like sort of stigma around, you know, when you go to your family and friends, you're the vegan, you're an animal rights activist. So we want to, you know, focus as much on inclusion as possible. And, you know, like you said, doing things like asking someone, or what Wayne said, like asking like, well, what's in that? Like, let me read the ingredients, can come across as really exclusive and actually sort of like further that ourselves, alienate ourselves from where we're trying to get to, which is actually we want to empower ourselves and like invite those people. So this is sort of like an intersection. It's like a platform where, you know, we can all intersect. And, you know, when we are going to, you know, when they say like, if you are going to fight a battle, make sure it's one that you can win. And like with animals that are being, you know, displayed on a table, that is violence, and it's really hard to argue with that because it's someone's body. And you know, a lot of us have dogs and cats at home, and I mean, I have told my father that like, you might as well just take Mimi and slit her throat and put her on the table. And I mean, that's horrible. I can't even imagine that. It's terrifying, but you know, it's easier to make that connection. So that's, you know, my personal experience and just this like thought on exclusion versus inclusion.
I forgot the word of that. Oh, Rebecca.
Sorry,
You moved.
Yeah. I also have some comments on the vegan thing, and then kind of like the byproducts question that I asked about earlier. So I like the fact that we're not putting vegan into the pledge because vegan is still a relatively new term that not a lot of people are familiar with. And they hear vegan, they're like, oh, like, what is that? And simplifying the language, I think, would be very helpful for dialogue and to communicate, like, why you're doing what you're doing. And then the point about, like, being ostracized from friends and family and things like that for, like, you know, well, is that vegan? Like, you know, becoming the, like, the vegan police, essentially. Like, I think I've actually, like, used this, like, 2 days ago. Like, I was invited to dinner and, like, a potluck. And I told my friend, like, quick note, like, I won't eat at a table with bodies of animals or their byproducts. And, you know, she was like, okay, that's cool, you know, and she was like, will you bring something? So I think it's up to like the interpretation of them and whatever, if they're like, oh, like this has, you know, whatever it may be, and they're like, oh, like, I don't know if that's vegan, like, it's like a learning process versus if you like say like this and this and this is what I, you know, won't eat. So I think, yeah, I think that's my opinion. I'd love to see something with like bodies of animals or their byproducts, just because of the fact that it's more than just vegetarian and it's what we want. But yeah, that's my.
I mean, how I framed my own personal commitment 2 years ago, which was before we knew we were going to do this, is it's about violence. Like I just said, I'm not going to sit, I'm not going to go to a place where there's violence or symbols of violence. And for me, you know, all of these things are, you know, all non-vegan items are violence. So that is another way of looking at it.
So how do you do that in practice? If you were going to go out and have coffee with somebody and they're having a latte, and how do you know that that's not a soy latte or, you know, cow's milk? How literally, I mean, practical basis, how do you know?
I mean, there's like at someone's home versus at a coffee shop or whatever. I mean, all of my friends and family, like I've made this explicitly clear to them. And so, like my friends, like I'm really lucky that my friends who many do not care at all about animal rights, except I think maybe I'm reaching them, but they've accepted this very easily. And I typically only go to vegan places, but again, that's a very privileged Bay Area thing. There's like places where you have to go to a coffee shop like this, where the I don't know what that looks like, honestly. Like yeah, sure.
I just wanted to add that I think there's a learning curve to like every time you make any kind of commitment like this. I think I'm not the only person who, when I first went vegan, it was like, I don't know any other vegans. My parents were like, you know, I thought I was like doing this great. I'm like eating pasta and tomatoes off my parents. I'm like, yeah, there's cheese in that. You know, like there's always like this learning curve when you start out with, I think, anything, and it takes a while to get to the point where your friends and your family know that this is a conviction of yours, and they're not even gonna like. At this point, none of my friends would be like, "Hey, Sapphire, I want to try this like milkshake." None of them would even think that that would be an okay thing to do. But when it first started, it was a very long process of like, "Oh, wait, you can't have this. You don't wait, what?" So I think it would be in some ways kind of similar, just getting your friends and your family to a place where they know, like, okay, like Sapphire doesn't want to sit at the table where there's violence going on because she cares about animal rights, and like just turning the conversation from, you know, she won't eat this to that might have a little bit that same learning curve. That's my thought.
I'm so ambivalent about this thing because one of my friends who, she was kind of playing with the idea of being vegetarian or whatever, and then finally she saw a video on YouTube that convinced her about the dairy thing. Then when she gave up the dairy and she gave up the eggs, then the flesh was also off the table. Because she would sort of play with that, you know? Because it took like the dairy and the eggs thing to make her really understand that this is about animals. And it's just this very difficult, you know, it's just really hard. And I mean, I think it's great, but it just brings up a lot of stuff.
Can I clarify? Yeah. Are you saying it's difficult to do or difficult to know what to do?
Well, for me, it's really difficult to do.
Yeah. Wayne, do you have a comment? And then Kate.
Yeah, so
three things. One is we're going to have a Facebook group where we hope people can provide support and feedback for each other on these sorts of issues. So I don't think they're getting the right answers to any of these that will develop immediately. So, but hopefully through community discussion and crowdsourcing, we'll figure out the best approach. The second is, like most public pledges of this sort, including, frankly, veganism itself, there is going to be some self-interpretation. Like, you know, for example, I mean, for 3 or 4 years in the early 2000s, I boycotted everything that had stearic acid in it. So what that means is I was not in a car or a bus for 2 or 3 years. I did not read books that had collagen in them, which means basically all books, because glue has collagen, which actually is, that's not just like an animal byproduct, that's actually actual bones of animals in books. So like, my version of veganism was like extreme and militant back in the early 2000s, and frankly, maybe it should still be that way. But there is going to be some interpretation, and I think, as Priya said, part of the reason we're framing it this way is to include different conceptions, and still, obviously, aspire to always do the best we can. But the third thing I want to emphasize is, I think it's, you know, just learning from Food Empowerment Project and Lauren Nellis, we should just keep in mind that veganism is not cruelty-free. You know, just there are farm workers who are being exploited in plant-based production. Soy, for example, is one of the largest contributors to deforestation, which causes massive, untold violence to literally tens, if not hundreds of millions of animals in South America. So, you know, whatever line you draw, there are still contributions of mouth. And if you haven't read the blog post by Glenn Alexander in Southern California, he wrote a really wonderful blog post about a year ago called Veganism is Not Cruelty-Free, which I think it's important for us to acknowledge, especially when we interface with human rights workers, because a lot of human rights people, especially anyone who works in farm workers issues, will come back and say like, no. Let me tell you about what happens to farm workers. Don't tell me that veganism is not violence. So I just think that's something I'd suggest we keep in mind when we frame this, that no matter what line you draw, there are big systemic issues that none of us are fully addressing unless we're being activists. And that's kind of the punchline of Glenn's blog post, that the only way to really kind of escape our contribution to violence in a world that's filled with violence is to be an activist against all these systems of violence. So give that blog post. It was very controversial. It's unpopular in a lot of quarters, but I think there's a lot of really good information in that blog post. It's called Veganism is Not Cruelty-Free. And sorry to be proponent of a sometimes unpopular idea about veganism. But I do think it's important for us to be, especially when we're interfacing with human rights groups, to be knowledgeable about those issues and just be able to engage with them in an honest way.
And I have to apologize, I totally forgot that I said Dayton I was going to call on you a long time ago.
And I literally was going to say exactly what Wayne just said. Which is why, while I'm vegan by my own definition, I think for the framing of the pledge, like animal bodies on the plate makes more sense for exactly the reasons.
Kangs and then Chris.
I'm appreciating Leslie, like what and Michael, what points that you bring up is like it's going through my mind how to deal with those challenges as well, and it does seem like really overwhelming to like suddenly, you know, and I'm appreciating the folks who are reading and saying, you know, it's open to interpretation and like it's a process, and what comes to mind when it's like, how do you monitor? It's like away from being with people. What I think is having a conversation when you're not triggered, when they seem not triggered about anything. It's like, hey, can I talk about something I'm starting to do, and I like love getting coffee with you, and I really care about this. I want to figure out how to like be more dedicated to it. I don't want to become between our friendship. I don't want to like spend less time with you, and I would love your support. It's sort of like stuff like where you're coming from about it, and also the care for the connection. Like just even as I'm saying this, I'm like, oh, this is helping to make sense of how I someday.
I'm going to try to repeat those main points, and you can
Oh,
feel.
sorry, I wasn't meant to be really loud.
And well, you could also feel free to like.
Want me to move up and repeat it?
Yeah, because I'm like, I am not going to get that for.
Okay, so. Hi, everybody. So I was saying in response to what Leslie named about having, how do you go out for coffee, go out for coffee with your friends you've been regularly going out with, and start to, do you monitor what they're putting in their coffee? And I was thinking of it in terms of like, when you're not eating with those people, when you're not drinking with them on the phone or in person at some other time, and when there's nothing else charged up, say I want to talk to you about something that's, I'm starting to like think about, I'm starting to want to implement in my life, and I really care about our friendship and how it's going to impact that. And This is what I want to do. I still want to be able to go out for coffee with you. How can we work? Is there any way you'd be able to like work with me on this to support this pledge that I really care about and this movement that I really care about and the non-harm that I want to add to the world and still have our connection. And so just kind of naming the importance of both those things. Asking your friend how they would be willing to work with you.
Yeah, that's great.
I also just want to point out another thing that I've done a lot of is going on walks with people, babysitting, taking kids to the beach, and doing other activities that are not food centered. So there's no judgments on my family and friends on those activities. And because like I said, I'm a very big family oriented person. And so I miss my family when I don't get to see them. I'm really busy, so I don't get to see them a lot. So I really cherish my time with them. And these are different things that are still difficult sometimes. And some family meals are now vegan, but not all of them. So it's I don't necessarily have all the answers for that. But yeah.
Sorry, if I can just add on, I think what King said was a really, really good point. And I haven't done this, I think, to the extent that some people in this room have done this. But when I told my parents I didn't want to come over to their place if there were going to be dead bodies there, I called them a few days before I was going to come over and ask them to have the conversation. And I think if I had come to their house and been either that goes into the garbage or I go elsewhere, that would not have been a good conversation, right? Or that's more of that nature. So I called them and I was like, I just want to have a conversation with you. And that I think was a much more positive way of doing it. And it was not an easy conversation, but it would have been a lot harder had I been trying to do it 10 minutes before, after a long commute. So I just wanted to throw that out there. That worked for me, and I think Kane's tone is really good.
Oh wait, was I gonna call on you earlier? Yes, go ahead. Sorry, Chris.
Okay, I have two things to say and I have to project. Okay, so first on this topic of the whole discomfort of telling this to your friends and family that you are not going to eat if there are non-vegan products there. For me, what I ended up doing with my family is that, I told them in advance of, Thanksgiving and stuff, that if there are going to be animal products, I am not going to enjoy the time there. I'm going to be emotionally distressed, I'm going to be upset, and therefore I'm not going to eat with you guys. And, I got, of course, backlash at first, you're tearing up this family. But I think it's important to emphasize that you will be distressed. You will not be comfortable. You will not be happy. And, if they care about you and their relationship with you, they should try to accommodate you so you two can have a good time with them. So I think that's what I use to work with my family. And then eventually we ended up with Gardein on the table instead of the turkey. And that's just my input, my personal experience on that. And this is just kind of out there, but it's about the webpage that I'm going back to. Is that okay if I give some feedback? Okay, I feel like the wording for number 1 and 2, I like how it's up for interpretation for a bit, but I think it's a bit unclear. 1, publicly refuse to eat animal this holiday season and beyond. So it's don't eat meat ever, right? That's what it's trying to say. But I feel like if you're not too good with English, you might be a bit confused by that. It's refuse to eat animal flesh for the holiday or ever again. Not just and beyond. I just feel like it's just a little technical thing for people who might have more trouble understanding this kind of sentence structure or who are native speakers. And the second one, again, the refuse to sit, maybe refuse to dine with, be around. I don't know, because I feel like when I first wrote it, I'm going out for 3 hours of sleep right now. I'm just like, what? It took me a second to process it. So I'm just thinking, what if someone only had 3 hours of sleep and knew 5 other languages before English? They just stare at that blankly and start drooling. So honestly, I don't know. I just thought maybe we could somehow clarify the language, make it easier to understand, so how to be succinct and get the message across. Any English majors in the room who could do it. I don't know.
Jason.
Yeah, I was just going off of what folks have been saying, just about it's gonna be difficult.
I project a little more.
It's gonna be difficult to do this pledge, and so I just think it's obviously good to be like tactful about it. Like don't show up, to like a get together where there's gonna be food, and then just be like, oh, hey everybody, there's this pledge I'm doing. See you later. So or like I'm gonna just throw out all this food you can spend hours making or whatever. So because I have this pledge, so let's do it now. So just like just like what people were saying about calling up friends and family, just being like totally like open that you want to take this pledge, and just asking for support in it whenever you get together, and then seeing what their response is. And some people might be like, "F you, I'm gonna eat my meat. I'm gonna buy more meat," or whatever. I don't care about that. You respect my right to eat meat, blah blah. If that's the reaction, then obviously you can be like, "Well, can we still get together?" You can explain how it makes you so uncomfortable. How you feel emotionally, just like a wreck seeing people enjoying eating meat, and so asking, well, I still want to preserve our friendship. Can we get together without our friendship or our interaction being around animal products? So going for walks and so forth. But just like I think just like maybe making sure that that's kind of clear in how you go about doing it, because that way people will probably have more success with it, and it also won't come across as being like very, condescending and not caring about their time and so forth. It just comes across as being more like what Gandhi would do, like telling people beforehand, oh, we're going to do this march just to let you know, this is what we're going to do. So we're going to do it anyway, even if you don't like it, but I just want to let you know so you're not like totally thrown off. This is what I have to do because I have to stay true to my morals and so forth. So, just that if that could somehow be included in how we take the pledge, I think it might be more, it'll at least create opportunities for discussion on these issues more.
I want to ask if anyone new has there's anyone who hasn't spoken yet has any comments?
Shut down.
No, we'll put you too, but okay. I think this is also so another thing that we haven't talked about a lot yet is community support and supporting each other while doing this, and different ideas for that. And so there's obvious things like just getting together with people who care about animals in addition to people who don't. There's vegan Thanksgivings that will be happening, and vegan no Thanksgiving that will be happening. And but does anyone else someone suggested previously sharing circles or support circles? But does anyone think that's a good idea? You would want to go to that? I should see maybe a show of hands. That sounds like something you'd be really excited for. Okay. So and how often do you think stuff like that should happen? Monthly, every other year, once a day? I have what I feel, but I have no idea what other people think is good. Adam?
Well, we discussed this before, Chris. Just with the support circles and this kind of thing, I don't think it needs to be a DXC event or any sort of formal event. I would love to see people in communities, especially if they're fortunate enough to have a space where they can host people, just kind of do this informally. Maybe members of the community, 3 or 4 people at the beginning of the month are like, hey, I can host the first week, the second week, the third week. I got 5 spots in my apartment who wants it. And just open their space, and whoever shows up, and we're just going to support you, and whether it's around the pledge or whatever's going on in your life, around animal rights or just general.
How many people feel like they could host a support circle? Awesome. Cool. So I think this is definitely something we'll do, and I think it doesn't need to be something that like the organizers in DXC need to have a lot of like work in. I do like when we coordinate with each other just so that we don't compete in terms of events. And it'd be funny if there were like 2 support circles at the same time or whatever, and, you know, but that, I mean, if we get to a point where we have them in faraway places, I mean, that can definitely make sense too.
I just wanted to ask how many people would actually be interested in, or find it useful or resourceful to have like simple like strategies, or like here's what to say in this specific situation, or how you can approach this. Or if, maybe that sounds like too
Formulate.
Yeah, like too formulated, or if it's something that people find helpful, like I would read that. Like I want to know how other people. So we also actually have a Facebook group that's already been created. We haven't added people to it yet because we wanted to wait till we had this discussion. But that group will essentially serve as a virtual space where all of us can, talk about these sort of situations and say like, hey, I'm going to this event next week. Do you have any suggestions? And like, here's the situation. And I think in the past, especially in like the DXC Community Forum, we've had so much success. Like people brought up this sort of, like situations, and they've gotten a lot of suggestions from other people in the community.
I've been up here a while. Does anyone else want to facilitate for a little bit? Facilitate? Sure. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Can we actually comment on one of the people? I just want to emphasize in response to Michael and Leslie's concerns, our hope really is, or at least my thinking when we were discussing this, is that this is an empowering thing and not an alienating thing. And this is the sort of pledge that if you're the sort of vegan who's been really passive aggressive for years about these sorts of things and just like really wanted to say all these things and really miserable at all the events, and you never had like any sort of support for it, and you weren't sure what to do, and you were kind of being rude to people anyways, and they weren't sure why, and they just thought you were annoying because you were being passive aggressive, this is a pledge that's going to help you crystallize it and get a lot of support for that. So, I mean, I don't know if any of you have read about like a reality distortion field that supposedly Steve Jobs had, where everywhere he went, like all these people were convinced of ridiculous things. Like, I kind of think of the pledge as creating not a reality distortion field, but like a moral realignment field, where everywhere you go, you start just, it's almost like you have a zone of influence around you. And at least for me, I mean, I sort of took the pledge just accidentally, just because I was getting into too many fights with people over these things, and I realized, okay, I probably shouldn't eat around people eating animals, because I'm always going to discuss it, and they're always going to be mad. It's not going to go well. But it ended up really empowering most of my relationships with people who are not animal rights activists. And like my friends and family, they started respecting what I was doing a lot more, and they started engaging with me a lot more, because when we were having interactions, they were so negative, right? They were always like, oh, why are you doing this? Either they're making fun of me, or I'm like reactively getting really defensive about it because they're making fun of me or telling all these jokes. And so like, I feel like I have many more friends who are not vegetarian or vegan, and the relationships are a lot stronger, and there's a lot more mutual respect. Or maybe not mutual respect, is that? There's a lot more respect towards animal rights, right? And I mean, I still respect them as individuals. I don't necessarily respect their particular position on this issue, but it's not because of them. I still think they're wonderful people. It's really helped me. And like, there was a period of time, like 3 or 4 years, where I wasn't hanging out with my family at all. And now, for like the past 6 years, I eat with my family all the time, at least 3 or 4 times a week, and every single meal is vegan. And it's been that way for now 7 years. And it's like with Chris, it's influenced a lot of my family members, because they start realizing, oh, it's not that bad. Like, going to turkey is actually kind of fun.
It's the opposite. It's not like Chris. Like, I learned this from Wayne, so I got the idea of doing this from Wayne.
And I got it from other people too.
So I wanted to invite people like who have not spoken to speak, but also if you are like thinking something and you're just like, this doesn't make sense to me, we really want to hear about it. So if you have any thoughts or ideas, questions, please ask.
Or share. Is, can I take the pledge without being completely sure that it's going to work every time?
Yes.
Yes.
I think, yes. I think it's just like anything else in life. I mean, we make all sorts of commitments and aspirations, and sometimes we don't meet up to them, but I still think the public act of making the commitment influences us in that direction. And I think, yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry. Oh. Go ahead.
I really appreciate the discussion and certainly struggle with this issue around holidays and every time. Don't personally want to eat with people who are eating animals. And I've taken different tactics. One strategy I think about, which is counter to this, and I'd love to hear people's thoughts about it, is if I go to Thanksgiving and people are serving animals and animal products, I can talk about it, be a voice, have an influence, versus if I don't go, then my voice really isn't part of the conversation. I struggle with, I have erred on the side of thinking I'm going to have more of an influence and an impact if I'm there, if I'm not restricting myself, if I'm willing to go anywhere. And like, that's part of my activism. Like, yep, I'm going to go eat with you and I'm going to raise the issue at some point, it's going to come up, versus my, personal self-care strategy would be, I don't really want to have anything to do with this. It tortures me. So I'm just wondering what people think about, do you have greater influence taking a hard stand of, no, I'm not going to do this, or being there around people?
That's a really good question. And I know that both Chris and Wayne have talked about how they do this, so maybe I'll share about how I do this. And I think and we should all understand that not every one person's going to do the same thing the same way. So there was a situation in my family where there was a wedding, and the first thing that I would say is have a discussion about it at least before the event, right? And I just first I was just I don't want to go, but my family really wanted me to go. And I know Wayne just mentioned this having this influence everywhere you go. So I ended up going to this wedding, and there were animals being served there. However, the situation ended up being that the table that I was sitting at was, everyone was not only were they not eating animals, but they were also there was really not that much food there that was vegetarian, but that was okay. And everyone was talking about animal rights, even to the point where my family members were coming up and apologizing, we're really sorry, there's not not that many vegan options or whatever. But also talking about they felt uncomfortable, and I just remember my dad, who historically has not been very supportive, has gone angry, was kind of proud. He was I could see that he was yeah, I can do this. So that's how I chose to deal with that situation. Again, I don't know if it was I did have complicated feelings about it, and I felt guilty just being present in this place and uncomfortable in this place of violence. So I actually don't know if that was the right thing to do. But I think the biggest takeaway is always having a discussion about it is important, because you never know how that might end up influencing the situation.
Was your table vegetarian at the wedding?
Yeah. Sapphire?
Can I sort of try to give an answer to that? I don't know. I mean, I think that one thing is that whenever you make any kind of boycott or any kind of personal statement of what you're, what you support, don't support, the biggest thing is just actually talking about it. If what we were suggesting was, just don't go to dinner and don't tell them why. I think obviously that it's that's a very good thing. But we're suggesting, talk to your family members, tell them why this is important to you. Don't miss that conversation. But then, end it with kind of, I want to go and have dinner with you. Let's make this a dinner that's friendly to animals. So it's not so much about just going there and whether you don't go and you don't tell them, or you go over to dinner and you tell them what you think. Trying to find a balance of still making sure you get your opinion in, but taking that step with respect and seriousness about your commitment. And that's kind of, I think, the main third here. There's definitely, we don't encourage people to not be with their family and friends. The encouragement is to try to take your conviction and influence social networks around you, with friends and family. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, I'm just really struggling with whether I have more influence in that hard line, or I've not been able to convince any of my family to go veg or vegan, but they will serve vegan food when I'm around. They'll serve meat too, but they have more vegan options. So is that, do I have more influence there? Or if I know if I say, no, I won't come over, you're serving meat, then they're going to keep having meat and they'll write me off.
I just wanted to check in. Does the internet have anything to say? People online? Do you all have anything to share?
The rest of DXC is just the internet.
No?
I started that. I'm sorry.
comments, but
Okay. Rebecca?
Yeah, the power of this pledge or like this statement is, it goes beyond like what you can think of. Like, I've tried this with coworkers as well. Like, you know, we have lunch together at, you know, our weekly meetings, and they brought KFC one time, and I was like, well, I'm not even gonna be around that. So they ate outside at a different table, and I ate inside by myself. And then when they were done, they called me, and they're like, Rebecca, we're done eating. And I was like, okay, thanks, you know, like everything was cleaned up. But that's one example. And two, I think you won't, it's not so much like not even attending the event, but like, I remember when Adam mentioned that he was at a different table, like when he, you know, was, I don't remember what holiday it was or something like that, but like, you just don't have to be present, which is a catalyst for change, because you're actually, you know, advocating for change of behavior versus like it's just food. You know, it's no longer about food anymore. It's like, okay, great, thank you for giving me vegan options. But now you're actually changing it to the fact that you're like slowly saying like, I will not accept this. So I think that's where the change starts to happen. Like, you can, like, my friend also said like, well, like, is it okay if I cook? Like, because I was over at their house, you know, and she's like, it's okay. Is it okay if I make something? I'm like, yes, of course. Like, this is your house. You're welcome to do what you want to do, but I won't sit with you, which is a little different than like, you know, they think, oh my gosh, you know, they won't even be around us, and she's ostracizing herself from us. Like, it's at the table, which is more communal and like spiritual gathering. You just won't come and you won't come to the gathering, which is a little different than like, you know, well, why can't you order the vegetarian roll and I'll order my, you know, sushi roll over here? Like, why can't you just animals? You know what I mean? I think that's the turning the tables part comes into play.
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. And I just wanted to highlight something that you said, which is the second part of the pledge here. The act of publicly refusing or like not being present is actually, you know, taking action. So that's a symbol in itself and shows that you are willing to take a moral stance, whether, you know, you not being there, again, for something that you believe in. Wilson?
So 3 different comments. One from Victoria, who says that I think she thinks it's really important that we spin this in a positive way. I think Wayne sort of, other people have said different things, like similar things about how, you know, we don't want this to be like an isolating thing, you know, as much as possible. So make it a positive spin. Second, 2 separate points from Venkatesh and Zoe. Venkatesh says that, you know, he often meets with coworkers over coffee or like work, and it's like he cannot think of a way he can do the pledge as a vegan pledge and still continue his work. So he wants to feedback on that. Zoe had similar concerns about how at school, at every lunch table, people are eating animals. So like there's nowhere she can go. So I don't know what the answer to this is, but I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah, I have that same dilemma at work where I have events that I have to facilitate and be present at, and there is meat served, and I've not been successful in saying no to that.
Wait, do you want to talk a little bit about the job situation, the work situation?
I tried to do this at the job too, and honestly failed miserably. I remember I did this for a while, honestly not because it was a pledge, but because the reasons I said previously, that I was just being very passive aggressive and annoying to people, and I realized, okay, this just isn't working. I'm just not do this because I'm being like a stereotypical annoying being, and not even being strong and confident explaining things, just being passive aggressive and annoying. So, but then I stopped doing it, and then I started. At work, I started doing it because I was when I was a faculty member at Northwestern School of Law, the dean wanted to sit down with me and talk to me about my research. And I was like, oh. And like I had no power at all in that relationship. It was the dean. It was a very distinguished figure, both in terms of his scholarly influence and his power at the school. And so like I sat and watching me to stay. It was terrible. It was like horrible for me because many of you probably know, like I'm very much the sort of person who likes interacting with individual animals, and like I spend a lot of time in farm sanctuaries and meet a lot of cows, and like I had not seen like bones used in that way in a long time when I sat down and had dinner, lunch with the dean. I'm not saying people should make exceptions to the pledge, but I will say that I think we're open to the idea that, you know, there are always going to be moments, no matter what your moral commitments are, where you don't live up to exactly what your moral commitments are in an imperfect world. And I think we have to allow the good to be sufficient and not let the perfect be the enemy of the good, right? So, and I think that's true of everything in life, that perfect should never be the enemy of the good. So in that regard, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily the case we should say like, build in 10 different exceptions to the pledge, and because I think that's kind of you're going to start, the problem with that is you start developing a slippery slope where the pledge just kind of undermines itself. It's like everything is an exception. It's like, oh, but you know, it's the same as true of veganism itself. You say like, oh, I'm going to make an exception for mono and diglycerides, the next day you're going to make an exception for honey, and the next day it's sugar, and then eventually you're eating dairy and eggs again. So building the exception in maybe not that important, but I always think back to like one of my professors, Jeff Stone, who's a very distinguished constitutional law scholar, what he said is like, we have to have a clear rule against torture, because in the exceptional circumstances where we actually do need to torture someone to find out where the nuclear bomb is going to happen, people are going to break that commitment anyways. It doesn't matter what the law is. You're going to torture that person to find the bomb is. But in all the circumstances where we don't actually need to torture people, if we have an exception built in, we're going to start torturing people, like Guantanamo. You know? So let's just have the clear rule: no torture. Yes, when the bomb needs to be found, someone is probably going to torture the person. And maybe, like, you know, that's just something we have to live with. We should still have just a clear and absolute rule that there's no torture allowed. So I would say something similar about this. But I don't know. I mean, this is why we're having these sorts of conversations, because we don't know how this should play out.
So just one announcement. It is almost 2 o'clock in 20 minutes. So I wanted to just say like maybe 5 more minutes, and we can take a few more comments and questions. So if you have any last thoughts, or at least like people who have not spoken, please, you know, take this chance. And of course, we will be continuing this dialogue. So I think Chris, you had your hand up? No? Okay. Leslie, and then Keynes, and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay, I'll try to be quick. I think it'd be really important when we set up this Facebook group for people to share their positive experiences.
Yeah.
And when it worked, and give as much detail as you possibly can.
Yep.
And I think that's a big inspiration for people, encouraging.
Yeah, I agree.
That's a great point. And we're also planning on having a series of like, you know, writings and blogs from people, and you know, we'll emphasize that they should highlight the positive points. Okay?
Let me move closer so I'm loud enough. And I want to acknowledge that we talked a lot. I wanted to respond since Michael brought up going to spend time with relatives a while ago. I had 2 ideas. One was having a network of people you can call when you're with your family and it's not going to be perfect, and like maybe you can't, you know, they're elderly and you don't want to like come down on them for eating meat, and to just get, you know, support from different people in the group and just be like, this is really frustrating, so that you can have care for yourself while, you know, when you are in these challenging situations, that it's not just going to have a resolution. The other thought I had was, it's also been on my mind, so many people I know who are like, I'm allergic to all these different vegetables, so the only thing I can eat is protein or meat, and diabetes being such a meat-focused thing. Starting to compile vegan nutritionists, because I don't actually know like the truth behind the whole diabetes thing. I don't know a lot about nutrition, but when I hear people tell me that, I'm, you know, that like doctors and whoever have told them the only thing that will heal different ailments is eating a lot of animal products. I don't know the contrary to that. So like, if anyone else is interested,
has a great article.
Yeah, they do.
summarizing the research. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. And like maybe we could start to put together, at least in the Bay Area, different nutritionists and doctors that are vegan, and have that like as a resource. And that's another project to take on. But it would be great to just like make that available when there are people in our lives that are like, oh, I'm allergic to all these things, or I need it for this thing.
Yeah, thanks, Kangs, and of course the support group. You know, there's so many people like you just mentioned. Have this article, like we can all sort of use that platform to get together and use and share resources. Okay, so does anyone on the live stream have any thoughts they want to share? Last questions?
No.
So let's make this an ongoing conversation, obviously, and you know we will continue having this dialogue. And so we didn't mention this earlier, but the date that we're planning to release this is on, like, you know, just make it very public, is on the 1st, November 1st. And as Wayne mentioned earlier in the meetup today, we have some big announcements coming in the next month. So, you know, paired with that and the holiday season coming up, this is going to be very powerful. Because we have, you know, so many stories to share, and we'll have a lot more excitement and push behind the pledge. So thank you all for being here today and attending and sharing your wonderful thoughts, and hopefully we can all have private conversations after this. Thanks everyone for joining us from Toronto, and I know that Venkatesh is in France.
He's in Switzerland.
He's in Switzerland. So thank you all for, you know, being here and joining us virtually.
Hey.
Thank you.
Maybe, if you have any continuing feedback on this, you know, I think there are a few places. If you have private feedback, you know, please feel free to send it to dxe@directactioneverywhere.com. If you'd like to start some more public discussions, we actually are planning to launch a forum fairly soon called Discourse. That would be a great opportunity to do that. If you're not on the DXC Community Forum, DXC Community Forum on Facebook is another space that we can start having some public discussions about the same issues that we were talking about today.
Yeah, let us know and we'll add you.
I think this is such a great thing. I just want to say that because it puts it out there that, because we've been told as vegans for so many years that we're supposed to go, we're supposed to keep our mouths shut, we're supposed to smile and keep everything under wraps. Just keep everything cool, and maybe somebody will notice that we're not eating the turkey. And to actually come out and, you know, take this commitment and say, you know, maybe that's not, you know, maybe I just can't be here. I think as a goal for us is, you know, maybe we can't always do it, but to set it out there, it's okay to say, I'm not going to be here. I'm not going to sit down. I can't deal with you cutting up a dead animal. And I think it's really good to put that out there as an aspiration of something to work for, instead of we're working for keeping our mouths shut. So, yeah.
Okay, last thought, and then we're gonna.
Okay, I just wanted to acknowledge all the amazing work Wilson's done on the website.
Woo! Yeah. And on that beautiful fork. Or maybe not beautiful. Passable fork.
Someday I will, like 10 years from now, I'm gonna be like, I have the original one. And it will be worth a lot.
Wow, I didn't even think about this. Someone should steal this now. If you want to be rich 10 years from now, better take it.
Okay, if you can take it off my wrist. Okay, so bye everybody.
Michael.